Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Let's do this. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. I'm Andrew Paterson, your host for this afternoon's festivities. Big win for the Winnipeg Jets last night and a big show coming up today on WST. Rick, our old pal and partner from the afternoon ride, is going to join us coming up at 1:45 today. And at 1:15, we will talk all things Jets, discuss the big win last night, top line coming through, Connor Hellebuyck's first shutout, and much more with the incomparable Murat Ates of The Athletic. As always, Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily is brought to you by Not AutoCorp, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Royal Sports, and our friends at Boston Pizza Winnipeg, and very pleased to be welcoming on for our golf sponsor all season long, our friends at the my favorite private club in Winnipeg, Breezy Bend. Big thanks to Corey. Can't wait to get going with Breezy coming up, and of course get on the links as well. Let's bring in Michael Remis as we get things going on a Tuesday afternoon. Remo, what's going on? Big win for the Jets last night, and a lot of people were tweeting during the game saying good call about the big game from the top line. We spoke about it yesterday. We expected a big performance from the Scheifele, Wheeler, Stastny line, and man, they delivered last night.
Yeah, Huss, you called it. You said Scheifele, Wheeler, Stastny. They were pissed off. They were ready to go. And look, I had said that I thought the Jets had played well again the two games against Edmonton, but Connor McDavid was the difference. Vancouver didn't have a McDavid. Paterson out. Horvat, takes a puck to the leg, and he's out. So they're missing a couple of their top guys. But the Jets continued. I think since that last game against Toronto, they have played very strong defense, limiting the opponent's shots to a lot more than they were doing in the past. Blake Wheeler came out and set the tone right away with that goal. And someone said Stastny and Wheeler couldn't shoot. And you saw Wheeler scoring a goal, Stastny scoring a goal as well, showing off those wrist shots. So good for them, get on track, and that's kind of what we expected. Hellebuyck, with a statement. He didn't have to do anything too crazy, but he made all the saves. Had a couple of help from the post, but he'll tell you, Huss, that was because he was in great position, and he induced the post. That was all his positioning led them to hit the post because
that's exactly what happened last night, and he was asked about it afterwards. If you haven't, by the way, folks, if you haven't seen Hellebuyck's post-gamer presser last night, do yourself a favor and check it out. I often said that he is the most interesting guy to speak to. My favorite interview, I don't think just the Jets. I mean, I'm trying to think of another guy in the NHL that I enjoy hearing him talk more than Connor Hellebuyck. And he had some beauties last night. Talked about, being in great position, talk about playing a perfect game with his team, obviously just referring to the shutout, no goals got in on it. And then he also discussed and described in a way that only Connor Hellebuyck can, Michael, what Paul Maurice referred to as the fancy footwork when he was playing that puck behind the net and sort of took himself out. I don't know whether he toe-picked or what, but as Connor said, sometimes you just have to let momentum carry you.
Yeah, there were a couple times yesterday where he goes to play the puck, and it's a bit of an adventure. And maybe a bit more so than you'd like, but he did, to his credit, he got the job done. And yeah, when he got out there and flopped on that, Maurice called it a toe pick. I was like, oh man, that's ugly. He did make the pass. It almost got, I think, turned over. They were able to break it out, but at least they can have a laugh. He ended up getting the shutout, but maybe sometimes when he goes back there, a bit more of an adventure than you would like.
There's no doubt about that. The most nervous I think any Jet fan gets when it comes to Connor Hellebuyck is just simply when he's not in the net. Because there's been some plays. I mean, it's not his forte, shall we say. Stopping the puck is, though. And, this is the guy, he really deserved a shutout probably earlier this season. I mean, there was a few games where he had zeros late into the third period and games that the team was comfortably ahead and, one got past him. And, he's a very proud guy. I think that, first and foremost, he wants to win hockey games, but it is nice to, get that zero, especially, considering the way that he's played so far. I think most Jet fans would agree that probably deserved one earlier, but bottom line is, we've spoken so much about, the team, and especially coming out of Edmonton. The fact that the team did play quite well. The results for the top line were miserable, and I think the biggest reason for that is a guy named Connor McDavid that wears number 97 for the Edmonton Oilers. So to come into last night's game, to have that line lead the way offensively, and to have some good things happen for them at the same time as your Vezina Trophy winning goaltender puts up a 0, hell of a way to start the week for the Winnipeg Jets. And, coming off those 2 losses to Edmonton and things getting a little bit tighter in the division, a really, really important win. And the team will be feeling good going into the rematch tomorrow night for a 9:30 Winnipeg start.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they needed. They needed a bounce-back game. And look, I thought they had played well, ran into some bad luck. They continued that strong play, and they got the results. Blake Wheeler, finding the shot early definitely helped out. The game was broken open. We have to talk about the third line in Kopp and Lowry and Appleton.
Adam Lowry, scoring star.
Yeah, I thought he might have had the hat trick there, but the first one, maybe a bit lucky. He goes to make the sauce pass to Kopp. And
what was lucky was that Kopp didn't get it. He sort of took a wave at it with his stick, which could have turned it into a high sticking goal. But luckily he whiffed on it. It went in, and then they were off to the races. And then he got another one shortly after that.
Yeah, the Kopp tip play to Lowry in front, really nifty pass, and then Lowry just managing to get the toe of his backhand on that. Very well done. And when this team's going, Huss, on all cylinders, you're getting production from all the lines. We've seen, Matthew Perreault have a good stretch recently, and you've seen the Ehlers, Dubois, and Connor line do well the last couple of games. But last night it was lines 1 and 3, Scheifele, Wheeler, Stastny all chipping in, and then that third line, Kopp, Lowry, Appleton, making their mark as well. So, it was a great team game, great bounce back from what you want to see. And, the Jets have been pretty good this year at beating up on those teams that aren't in the playoff race. They just went, 4-4-1 against Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton. But now they got a bit of an easier stretch here. By easier, I mean against teams that aren't in the playoffs, Vancouver and Calgary. And Calgary lost again yesterday. We'll get to them later. But I thought you got to be happy. You got to be impressed. That's a game that good teams win. You stop the slide. You don't get to 3 in a row. And you have a great performance up and down, beating up a somewhat hurt team.
Well, you make a great point, and we may as well get to the Calgary Flames on it. They lost last night 2-1 to the Ottawa Senators, and the Flames are in such a predicament right now with needing to put together a string of wins. And we've talked all year long about making the most of your games on the schedule against the Ottawa Senators. And if Calgary doesn't make the playoffs, they will look back to a few of these games against Ottawa over the course of the last 3 weeks. The 2 terrible losses that ended up getting Jeff Ward fired, and this one last night. And I always have time for Daryl Sutter's post-game pressers. He was choked last night. And speaking that they need to play a full 60 or 65 minutes, they didn't get it. He fired a few cliches in there, but the point was that. We're now seeing some of the inconsistent Calgary Flames that were on again, off again, that ended up costing Jeff Ward his job. And it seems like there's still quite a bit of work for Daryl Sutter to do. And on top of all that, Remis, the Flames earned themselves some pretty bad karma last night with the way they behaved at the end of the game, trying to take Philip Gustafsson's puck for his first ever NHL win.
Yeah, before, during the show yesterday before the game, you were saying you were on Ottawa. I was like, no, I'm taking Calgary. Ottawa, first of all, they're Ottawa. Although they have played very well in the last, 2 months, they've played pretty well. And they're starting this goalie. It's his first career start. Calgary's got to take this one, right? No. And to make matters worse, I agree. The karma gods are going to get back at Calgary. You don't play keep away with the guy's puck after his first win. I don't know what the unwritten rules say about that, Huss, but it seems like, look, be nice, be a good person. Guy got his win. I like Rasmus Anderson, but come on, man, you don't take the guy's puck, and then they're trying to Ottawa's trying to get it back. This is like schoolyard bullying from a Calgary team that has disappointed all year, over and over again, got their coach fired. That just shows you how depressed the Flames must be, how mentally sad they are right now, that you're out of a playoff spot. You've disappointed, and you got to take this guy. This guy's having a career moment, first win, and you go and like, how petty is that you go take the puck, and they lost the game and just have it. It's just awful for Calgary.
They could not have looked any worse after that. It was bad enough that they lost in the fashion that they did, but I heard Craig Button earlier today talking, and he absolutely ripped the Flames for both the performance on the ice, the performance at the end of the game, and I really do think, Reem, at the end of this season, at the end of 56, especially when we're talking about that the line between fourth and fifth, the team that's in fifth is probably going to be the team that didn't either get dominated in the head-to-head matchup or just simply didn't get enough points against the Ottawa Senators. I mean, if we're talking about a race that comes right down to the wire and the difference is a point here, a point there, from Montreal's side of things, if they miss out, it'll be because they stink in overtime and lost 9 in a row before winning on the weekend. But for the Calgary Flames, if they're out, they'll look directly at these lost points against the Ottawa Senators as the reason why they're not participating in the playoffs.
Personally, for me, Calgary, they're on my banned list. Now, I'm not taking them ever again. First of all, I can't take them after you act like that on the ice. But after you perform the way they performed and disappointed over and over again, Gaudreau and Monahan officially on my banned list for daily fantasy. I'm done. Every time, like, this is the time. Gaudreau salvaged it at the end. But their salaries have been going really cheap, and I keep saying, okay, this is it, let's go, and they stink. So I'm got to purge myself of taking them again. It's been way too much Calgary for me.
Great to have everybody firing it up with us live on YouTube this afternoon. And, of course, for folks that are listening later on in the podcast, we appreciate you joining us as well. Make sure to rate and review on your favorite podcast feed. Help the boys out. Lots of people in the chat right now, and I'll give a nod to David F. Dave said, very happy to see Wheels get a nice, important goal to reward all the solid work. That was huge, Blake Wheeler getting the first goal last night. And again, you talked about the connection between he and Paul Stastny in the shooting. Probably regretted not having 2 goals in that first period. I mean, they really did play that 2-on-1 perfectly. It was such a nice play by Stastny. I don't think Wheeler was expecting to get it back and was a little close in to get the puck up. But I think we saw in that first period, especially led by the captain, Reem, the drive, the commitment to be better and just to will themselves basically to better results. And that was, I think that was really important for the team, but especially Blake Wheeler. And we'll talk to Murat about this coming up. He did speak about, even being in the league for 15 years, the confidence can go at times. And I think that was very important just for the mental state of that top line, because as we've said before, this team will go as far as they take them.
Yeah, and I had joked that, when he threw the puck away, he was throwing away all those bad feelings and doing a mental reset ready for last night's game. And I think they were ready, and I agree with Wheeler. I mean, you can't dwell on that. They did play well. They got beat by McDavid. They came back and played even harder, and you definitely saw Wheeler working hard on that first goal. You saw him protecting the puck in the offensive zone behind the net, playing very well. So, props to him, and I agree. I mean, he's matured. He's a veteran now. He's learned a lot over his career, and they weren't dwelling on that last loss. They said, hey, it doesn't mean anything, 2 in a row. We know we're a good team. We know what we can do, and they went out, and they did that. And he did have the 2-on-1 early with Stastny. It seemed like Stastny didn't want to shoot. I thought he could have gone a one-timer, but maybe if Wheeler had been more ready and the pass has been more on the tape in the wheelhouse, they could have had a goal. And there was another nice 2-on-1, Ehlers and Connor with the breakaway. Ehlers delaying a bit too long so the defender could catch up, but they could have had a couple more. Maybe they got a bit lucky. Maybe Vancouver had could have had 1 or 2. They did have some posts there, but that's the way it went. The Jets were due for a win after losing 2 in a row, and they came out and played well, and I think that's the game that you wanted to see from them last night. And I think a lot of people in chat, I know, feeling a lot better about the Jets than they were after the 2 losses to Edmonton. Oh, Huss, you still there? I think we lost Huss. So we'll wait for him to come back in. He's done. Thank you, everyone in chat. We got about 250 people in there. Huss is plugging in. 250 people in there. Everyone, what up? If you are new in chat, make sure you close the chat. Hit that like button. Every like accounts, helps with the YouTube stuff. So thank you so much. Huss, are you back? We got you?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Excellent. By the way, that was an expert read. You are an elite YouTuber already, Remis. Now I know how we got to partner status so fast because, I mean, you have this down. An elite save of me during the program and just sliding right in for all the ways people can help us while they're tuning into Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Just elite.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And if you're not following us on any of the social medias, go to the description. All the links are there. We could use a couple more Instagram and Facebook followers. I had some nice posts on there, updates, mostly some videos. So yeah, I've got some practice at this. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll just hit the little routine here, turn on the on button.
It was amazing. Listen, before we get to Murat, I do want to thank our great sponsors, not AutoCorp, but Waverly and McGillivray. Why not get into the vehicle of your dreams at a great price with the help of the Knott team? If you're thinking about going electric, Knott AutoCorp is the Tesla leaders in town with a ton of stock coming in daily. And of course, if you're looking to get out of maybe a lease that you're in right now, they'll help you do that with their very successful consignment program. Find out more at knott.ca or pop down and see the gang at Waverly and McGillivray. And of course, we got to thank our friends at Boston Pizza Winnipeg. Just got this. Starting this Thursday, all local BPs will have a new program called Call the Shot. Order a Boston Pizza flight, 3 pizzas, 3 dips for only $18.49, and any Molson beer like an ice-cold Sub-Zero Coors Light, and you could win one of thousands of prizes like BP gift cards, branded beer fridges, or a custom-built backyard hockey rink, little ODR action, or a VIP NHL experience for 2. It all starts this Thursday. Call your shot at Boston Pizza. All right, let's get down to business. Been looking forward to this all week. We welcome in to discuss the big win for the Winnipeg Jets kicking off the week, Murat Ates of The Athletic. How are you, my friend? I think you're muted.
Last week, I saw a lot of highlights, so I got to throw that out there again. You guys have been awesome.
Oh, Murat, thanks so much. Well, it was great. And we had you right the first week, and we're still going. And the support's been amazing. And hey, I think you're good for viewership. There's a lot of fans of the work of Murat Ates, so more Murat is good for all Winnipeg Jet fans. And as I mentioned, we weren't sure how this conversation would go today. Would we be talking about the Jets' first 3-game losing streak of the season? Or we talk about a huge win to get back in the win column, and that is the case. And it all started, I think, last night with the captain, Blake Wheeler, and the way that line number 1 played, coming off some tough results against the best player on the planet in those 2 games in Edmonton.
Yeah, absolutely. We were texting, and we were like, "What's the show going to sound like? What's it going to look like? Are they going to be talking about 3 straight losses?" I was looking at those stats just for the last 5 games. Blake Wheeler was riding a minus per game minimum for 5 straight games heading into last night. Now, I'm not a big believer in plus minus because goals, a little bit of chaos happens. Somebody hits a post, somebody doesn't hit a post. Adam Lowry skies one, it hits just the right people, it goes in, right? So plus minus can be a little sketchy for that reason. But in terms of chances, Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, Paul Stastny, the only game in the last little while where they were really carrying it was Game 3 against Toronto. And I thought they shut down the Matthews line really well in Game 3, still ended up a minus on the night. And after 2 games in Edmonton where it just wasn't going for them, Wheeler was shooting pretty well, I thought, in Edmonton in Game 2, but nothing was working. Nothing was working. Meanwhile, Connor McDavid was doing his thing. They needed it. That's where I'm landing us. They needed that one. Yeah.
And Wheeler spoke about it afterwards. And, I think we're lucky and we're kind of spoiled at times. I mean, with the great sound bites we get from Coach Paul Maurice and, Connor Hellebuck, who's my number 1 by far guy to listen to. But Wheeler's right there as well. And, there are times when Blake Wheeler comes clean. And he really did last night. And it was fascinating to hear sort of the relief to have that game to be such a big part of the win. And to hear a captain that has done so much in the National Hockey League admit that, hey, he can be in here for 15 years, but, the confidence can go pretty quickly. And that was, I think, just for the mental state of the leaders of this hockey club and a line that, is so important to the Winnipeg Jets. A performance that I think everyone hoped for, and that certainly will be very good for them going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's great insight on your part, because I'm thinking I was the question after he talked about 15 years in confidence, or I was a couple after, and I wanted to follow up on exactly that concept because Blake Wheeler's a bit of a shot quality guy. Even if he doesn't look at expected goals, he's the kind of guy that says, hey, we got tons of offense all night long, even if they didn't score, as long as they were generating chances, right? So I kind of gave him a bit of an out, I thought, last night. I said, hey, look, like in Edmonton, it looked like you were shooting really well. You had a lot of rush chances. He had 3 shots on the night, and they were like tough off the shoulder, they had good looks, I thought, to Blake Wheeler's shots. And I said, well, hey, was it a case of finally you get the bounces, or was it a case of finally the slump is over? And I tried to give him an out in that situation. He didn't take it. He went back to that emotional well saying 15 years, man, confidence is an important thing. And I think to your point, it really must have been sticking, not only with him, but with Paul Stastny, with Mark Scheifele as well, because they're supposed to drive the whole thing.
Well, I mean, I'll say there's a lot of things that Blake Wheeler has. A poker face is not one of them. And it was pretty clear at the end of the game on Saturday night just how frustrated that the captain was. And I think that, I mean, that's certainly why I expected a big performance from that line. Whether the pucks were going to go in or not, you know, some of the hockey, sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But the bottom line is the amount of buzz that they had and the chances that they were creating in the offensive zone in the first period, I think really sort of set the tone for what the Winnipeg Jets wanted to do as a team last night in a game they really needed to win.
Yeah, leadership from leaders for sure. I thought that Blake Wheeler on that 2-on-1 where he scored with Paul Stastny, he did the right thing. He shot. I think that seam opens up through 5-hole with Thatcher Demko, because Demko and everyone knows Blake Wheeler likes to pass in that sort of situation. He was being direct. And I think that later he sets up Paul Stastny for what could have been a one-timer and a goal. Stastny goes back to Wheeler, and it doesn't work out in that situation. So I thought Wheeler in particular, among leaders like Paul Stastny, like Mark Scheifele, was a step above and a real driver, which is good because we were talking about him as a possible undriver, not so hot to start the season. And now that he's got this going a little bit, I thought he was aggressive on the forecheck. I thought he was making smart decisions in those sorts of situations, and Stastny got his in the end anyway, I'll say.
Murat Ates of The Athletic with us. Our old pal Rick Ralph will join us coming up at about 1:45 today on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. I could spend a lot of time talking about that top line, and maybe we'll come back to it, but Connor Hellebuyck gets his first shutout of the season, and like even through these last couple losses, I don't think there's been any thoughts that his play had been slipping. But at the same time, Murat, it was a really fun availability with Hellebuyck last night after the game, which it often is, but especially when he has a performance like that and gets the result that he wanted to. I think it's good for him just mentally to get that zero. Not that there's been any question with the way that he's been playing night in and night out for the Jets.
Yeah, he's an interesting human being. I mean, Connor Hellebuyck, he believes in mastery. He believes in the power of positive thinking. He believes in being able to manifest results through the sort of communication that he has. He's so determined in every situation to say he should have had it. He should have had it. He doesn't throw teammates under the bus. He gets really fired up in certain moments as well. And I just think he's such a wild card as a quote, but such a consistent person as a goaltender as a general rule. And the wild thing for me in terms of his stats this year, you could go back before last night's shutout, and that was, another great game, had help from the posts, but it was another great game in a long line of great games. But we're also looking at 3 goals or more, and I think it was 7 or 8 games in a row that he gave up. Worth double checking, but it's multiple games in a row, longer than you'd expect for Connor Hellebuyck to give up 3+ every single night. And he's doing that while also leading or being top 5 in the NHL in goals saved above expectation. So the guy's saving a ton of pucks, a ton of dangerous pucks, still has a bunch going in. So then that's when you get emotions like I think what you got from Hellebuyck.
Well, and speaking of confidence, kind of tying this back to the Blake Wheeler conversation, I think it's part of the reason why Connor Hellebuyck is the elite athlete that he is and just such a unique guy in that, Blake Wheeler owned it 15 years, captain, and, he had a rough stretch and, the confidence was wavering. I don't think we will ever say that about Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, the belief he has in himself is top 1 percentile. Let's just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Top percent of the percent. You could go NHL wide and he would be a unique animal. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I started daydreaming, like what would have to happen for him to say, you know what, guys, I'm not really sure about this right now.
It's impossible. That just doesn't. That's not in the realm of reality, Murat.
No, zero chance ever.
Now, quickly, a third line. Nice for Adam Lowry to get rewarded with a couple goals last night. They'll have a ton of plays like that. Sometimes they'll go in and sometimes they won't. But how important is that line, do you think? We focus so much on the Scheifele line and Pierre-Luc Dubois, that unit. To me, when the third line is going for the Winnipeg Jets, spending more time in the other end, sort of setting the tone themselves, that's the games where the Jets as a team are at their best.
I agree with that as a general rule, particularly because I think in Canada, teams are so top heavy. You have your Patersons, you have your McDavids and your Dreisaitl's, you have Matthews and Marner. There are teams that have players at a level, I would say, above Winnipeg's top line in terms of just the elite talent. And usually it's the top line or it's that Kopp, Lowry, Appleton line that's getting those matchups. And whereas other teams are top heavy, Winnipeg has that depth. And if Kopp, Lowry, and Appleton are all over the other team's zone, it either means that they're dominating one of the best lines in hockey because they're going up against the elites, or it means that they've been able to attack maybe the soft underbelly of some of these teams that aren't quite as deep as the Winnipeg Jets are from a forwards perspective. I thought Blake Wheeler summed it up really well, saying that line makes Winnipeg a bit of a matchup nightmare, and then that's where you go with it. And I think they deserve a lot of credit, not just for the goals, but I mean, Lowry scores 2. Kopp's driving the net on the second one, on the first one, and he's doing the cutback to set it up on the other one as well. So all to say, I mean, I agree with you, and they need that. They need that because they're not going to get the McDavid just wins you a game by himself performance from anyone, because that's so rare.
Kopp and Lowry have been synonymous as that pair on that role. We've had different guys, have sort of been through that spot over the last few years. How important has Mason Appleton's development and his play so far been this year to the success of that line when they're going?
Completely vital. Absolutely. The job was there. I would even say the job was there last year because you're not sure if Jack Roslovic's going to embrace the checking line role. Jack Roslovic also played a little bit in the top 6 when injuries hit. So that line was available to Mason Appleton last year. Injuries got in the way. Day 1 of training camp, and I brought this up a couple of times. Day 1 of training camp, after practice is done, Adam Lowry is doing some drills. He's picking up pucks off the wall. He's doing some battle drills in the corner. And who's stapled to his hip is Mason Appleton. And for me, that is a real live human being, no analytics, no, it's just pure emotional way of saying, guys, this is my job. I want it. I'm asserting myself. You're not going to see Adam Lowry without me right now. He seizes the job, has a breakout season so far. Huge part of why that line drives so well.
Is Appleton listen, I think the top 6 is pretty much going to stay the top 6 as it is right now. But given an injury, it's always, at least the last couple of years, Andrew Kopp has been the guy that'll move up and down. To be honest, I think Matthew Perreault has played his way into that conversation just with how effective he's been in limited minutes. But is Appleton a guy that you could see at some point, if need be, getting the opportunity to play with the big guns in the top 6?
If opportunity arises, maybe through injury, maybe through a rethinking of how the lines are structured from a top 6, bottom 6 sort of situation. You just look at his game, the way that he drives to turn the corner on people, the way that he turns the corner and then drives the net and is willing to crash and bang and score goals from his butt. I don't know what I'm allowed to say and not say on your show.
You can say it.
I can say ass, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He scores goals from his ass. And I think that that's such a unique talent on the Winnipeg Jets, a unique skill set, and it's playoff ready to me.
Yes.
I look at that game and I say that can succeed in the playoffs when the game gets especially violent. So I do see that. Kopp, you like him for the possession aspect that he has, the defense, depending on what the line needs. But Mason Appleton, if you need that puck just trucked straight through the net the way a young Blake Wheeler might do, I think he's your guy.
Murat Ates of The Athletic is with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Remo, get ready for this. I have a take. I have been waiting for this conversation to drop this take right now. And to be honest, the thought of this take being a legitimate take 6 months ago would have been insane. Murat, I have come to now, granted, this assumes that they are not adding a defenseman, Ekholm, somebody, just given the current roster composition of the Winnipeg Jets, I cannot see the Winnipeg Jets exposing Logan Stanley in the expansion draft. I think he's protected. Your thoughts?
This is a sea change, a seminal moment. This is something that we would not have considered 6 months ago. We wouldn't have considered on day one of camp. It was about midway through when it really started. Like Logan Stanley was just moving the puck better, faster, more efficiently than I really ever thought that he would at the pro level. And I wrote about that. So I am a little bit on that Logan Stanley train because you start seeing him make those quick decisions, move the puck out on that third pairing. It's heavily sheltered, but man, he's getting results on it, right? So who is he bumping out? Let's follow this through. Let's think this through, because obviously heading into this season, it's supposed to be Josh Morrissey. It's supposed to be Neil Pionk. And ideally, it's Dylan DeMello, who you just signed for 4 years at $3 million, who I personally believe is Josh Morrissey's most ideal partner on that top pair. And theoretically, that means Logan Stanley hasn't impressed anybody so much that other teams are going to come calling for him. So then how are you going to game this out, Huss? Who comes out? Is it going to be Morrissey because you don't think somebody's going to take that money? I don't think that's realistic.
No, I don't. And I'll give a shout out to Matt Lang, who's a regular listener, who tweeted that yesterday, said that, the Morrissey contract wouldn't be attractive to Seattle. I'm not there. I think I think if Josh Morrissey was available, a team that has no cap issues, and they're putting together a guy that can be a cornerstone of their team going forward, I think they'd jump at that in a second. To me, it's DeMello. And I mean, it's not a slight on DeMello, but and what got me thinking of this way is, like, look at what Derek Forbort is doing for the Winnipeg Jets right now on, a 1-year deal at like $1 million. I think that it is going to be a buyer's market for those depth defensemen, going forward. And to be honest, I mean, DeMello at $3 million, I mean, he's certainly not underpaid. There's some contract, there's some term on that. And if I'm Kevin Cheveldayoff, and I think this is the way the organization has built this team as well, are they more tied into a guy that they basically signed as a UFA, although they did get in a trade, or to a player that they traded up in the first round, had a plan to play 2 years in junior, to play 2 years in the American Hockey League, and then graduate to the National Hockey League? And I just think that every single thing that Stanley has done this year has kind of, reinforced the belief that the organization had him in the first place. And if you're thinking about a guy long-term to be out of the mix, is it Dylan DeMello or is it Logan Stanley? And as we sit here today, I've come around to, I think it's Logan Stanley.
Wow. So the logic of what you're saying makes sense to me. I really do see, especially because Logan Stanley is such an obvious, his skills are obvious, right? You're never going to miss him on the ice. You're going to notice him when he's having a good game. You're going to notice him. And I'm fairly sure, at least the folks that I've talked to within the Jets, they're passionate opinions about Logan Stanley. Not everybody believed he would become this, but there's a lot of people who are really in his corner, to my understanding. And I think that when you get that kind of passion and you project forward, he's only 22 years old, and you think, well, a guy his size, it's going to take a little while. They've got that emotional foot in the door investment in him sort of thing. I buy that. And then when you go to Dylan DeMello, I mean, I think that would be a really astute pickup for the Seattle Kraken, to tell you the truth. I value a guy who moves the puck so well out of his end that it turns into offense. Even if he's not getting a second assist, he might get the third or fourth, if those were things. I value a guy with that impact. I also caution, this does not negate the argument. I think Logan Stanley, you just made the case, and I could see Winnipeg protecting him. But I would caution folks looking at Logan Stanley's numbers and comparing them to any other Winnipeg Jets defenseman's numbers right now, because when you think of the usage that he gets, he's the only one that's been third pairing exclusively. Nathan Beaulieu bumped up, Tucker Pullman bumped up, Dylan DeMello bumped up. That's going to affect the numbers, those plus-minus numbers that a lot of people like to look at. It'll even affect, shot attempts. Logan Stanley's firing all those wristers from the point too. So he's going to look, you're going to really have to trust your eye test, because he's going to look a little bit disproportionately good right now compared to his competition from the analytics and from the plus-minus numbers.
No, I will buy that. I will absolutely buy that. But again, when you're talking about protecting a player when we're, dealing with, an expansion draft, there's part of it is the present, but also it's the future. And I mean, I just can't help but see how Logan Stanley looks better, more comfortable each and every game. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he actually gets that opportunity, depending on injury and whatnot, to play higher up in the lineup at times, because I think he's earning more trust and confidence of the head coach confidence that I think a lot of people in the organization already had on him, and it's all coming to fruition. And then I come back to this question, say you had to make that difficult decision, you really want to keep Stanley and you really want to keep DeMello, and you got to protect one of the guys, and then maybe you're going to make a deal to, have that other guy not picked. What's the cost? Is the cost more to have them not take DeMello or not take a 6'7", 22-year-old that just sort of showed that he's ready for the NHL? I think it's the big guy. So that's why I'm protecting him and working out. I think there'll be more DeMello-like options out there, potentially at a lower price, than there will be Logan Stanleys out there available in the expansion draft.
Right. So you're not playing the hand, you're playing the other person at the table in terms of poker terminology, right? I mean, you're looking at Seattle and you're saying what's going to be appealing. Well, Dylan DeMello might slip through the cracks in an awful hurry. Logan Stanley, you're invested in him yourself, but also he's the sort of person that's going to catch the eye. So you probably think Seattle could have a strong look at them. The other thing that I think about, let's go with your way. Let's protect Stanley, expose Dylan DeMello. Then you got to pivot your thinking to Winnipeg's forward group. Now, I don't think Mason Appleton ends up exposed at this stage. There's going to be some games played requirements, whether it's Toninato, whether it's Harkins, whether it's somebody else, whether Lowry is re-signed before the season. There's some work to do up front, but it may be that there are forwards even more impressive, more young, cheap, with a little bit of a brighter upside long-term than DeMello too. So maybe Winnipeg makes it out of the whole thing with all of its defensemen intact.
We've got some interesting chat on this topic. Mike Chapman, logically, DeMello makes sense because I think we survived without him, but he may not even be taken, so we could get away unscathed. But Stanley hasn't truly been exposed, so maybe we offer him and Seattle says no. And Derek Ingram, shout out DI, great to have you in on the Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily this afternoon. Tough to teach a guy to be 6'7". May turn out to be a poor man's Char, I hope, but he is dust right now. I mean, the guy has, as I said, the turnaround in the narrative around Stanley, once people actually saw him play and gave him a chance, has been really one of the great stories, I think, around the Winnipeg Jets this season. And, it's easy to focus on, the top line and Hellebuck and all that, but I mean, if you had told any Jet fan that at this point in the season, we'd be talking about Stanley as an NHL regular and potentially a guy important enough to the future of the franchise to be protected in the expansion draft, not a lot of people would have bought in, but it really is, one of the great stories around this season that has the Jets challenging for first place as well.
I wouldn't have believed it as recently as fall. I wrote a top 20 Winnipeg prospects. I talked to scouts inside, around the league, who weren't necessarily projecting Logan Stanley to be an NHL regular. I talked to people who knew his game very, very well, who didn't see it either. It, for me, was the scrimmage. I think it was the first scrimmage. It was a Wednesday of training camp where he just picked pucks out of the corner and moved them quickly, put his partners in good positions in a way that wasn't the advertisement for me. With a guy that size, he was supposed to play the game in front of him, lay the body, clean the front of the net, and all of a sudden he's distributing the puck. And you're like, hey, this guy probably thinks a little bit faster than that rumors had it for him. And all of a sudden, I think, actually, the last thing I want to say, I sometimes criticize the minute difficulty. I say he's sheltered, but it's not his fault. He's killing the minutes that he has. And you in terms of playing the game in front of you, that's all you can ask.
Well, and we all know Paul Maurice. I mean, Paul Maurice is a guy that, as a young player, you really have to earn that trust. And, I mean, you're not being put in those situations unless the coach feels that, you are better at it than other guys on the club right now. And, I think in a lot of ways, the way that he has handled Stanley when he's been in the lineup, I think is really I think Paul Maurice has done a good job of putting Logan Stanley in the best position for him to succeed. And more so than any other player, Murat, because of all the baggage that surrounded him and that pick for the last 4 years, I think that was maybe more important for Stanley than it would be almost any other young defenseman coming in and getting their first real consistent taste of NHL hockey.
Well, I've never had a long conversation with Logan Stanley about what that means to him, that those expectations, whether anything trickled into his consciousness. But I agree with you, that degree of sheltering, that's what you want for a rookie professional defenseman. That you don't want, even somebody with Sami Niku's experience being thrown right to the first pair beside Josh Morrissey in his couple of games in the season, right? You don't necessarily want Ville Heinola doing that same thing. If you're going to bring up a defenseman really conscientiously, to me, give him a good veteran partner, sheltered minutes, see what he can do, see how it goes. I mean, quality of teammate is particularly important, but also those minutes that you get, especially the difference between the top four and the third pairing, can be really big. So I agree with you. I wanted to name some other names because I agree with you. Logan Stanley has been treated exactly the right way to ease a guy in, and I don't think that's been the case for everybody.
No, I think it's that sometimes you learn lessons from the success and failures of other people. And I mean, you can say what you want about Maurice. The guy's got more experience than anybody, so he does have a lot to lean on. And I would say from an organizational standpoint as well. When you talk about, like, Logan Stanley may turn out to be the ultimate draft and develop pick when you think about it. I mean, so often the first rounders are counted on to be contributing relatively early in their career. It was the exact opposite for Stanley, and if things continue to trend the way they are, they will be proven right at pretty much every step of the way. And that is why I really do think that his future is in Winnipeg, and that may mean that he has to be protected in the expansion draft. And what a wild conversation to be having today, huh, Murat?
Absolutely, you're right. But he's one of their guys, and he's covering the bet, especially this season. The emotional investment. You changed the way I think today. I had not gone that far down this road until right now, and I think I'm there with you.
Well, and here's the thing. That could all change tomorrow if a big trade is made. Where are you at right now, in particular the target of Ekholm? We've talked about this over the last couple of weeks in a number of different forums and media. It does seem right now, especially when you see a performance like the Jets had last night, that there's a lot of potential with this club, and I think most people would agree that getting a player of Ekholm's stature to come in, not just for this year, but for another year to help along the likes of new NHLers likely Dylan Sandberg and Ville Heinola could be huge for the organization. I guess the question is, how much demand is it? How high will that price go for the Nashville Predators? And even though they're in different divisions right now, how will they feel about Ekholm playing for Winnipeg next year when things get back to normal in the Central Division?
I guess that the edge comes off that a little bit because you get out of it this season at the very least, but that's a good point, right? You never want to see your mistake come and bite you necessarily. I think Matthias Ekholm is the ideal player. I mean, his cap hit is so manageable. His performance has been top pair caliber for so long. He can play it any way you like it. He can contribute a little bit of offense, a lot of offense at times. He has a mean streak. And the fact that he's under contract next season as well shores up that left side, which I think actually has suddenly become, a place that might need shoring up with so few defensemen under contract next year. I think the prices are going to be high. I think that the more that I talk to folks, whereas Winnipeg might like to get out of it with pure future as a first and one of its depth prospect defensemen, you might hear Dylan Sandberg's name come up, and what a shame that would be after all of this time that Winnipeg spent waiting for him to make his pro debut, and I think he's been good with the Moose so far. So there's kind of a bit of a knife for you, or two sides of the same blade. That's not a phrase. You can go with that, though. For me, it just comes down to this. I see people on Twitter sometimes, Winnipeg's a paper tiger. They're not that good. They're not dominant. Whatever you think about that, for me, Winnipeg has a few years left of these excellent forwards, and now you have Paul Stastny. Now you have Adam Lowry for sure. Unrestricted free agents, both of them this summer. Blake Wheeler's 34. He's good. We've seen his impact recently, especially. But how long is that going to last? How do you go through those? How do you look at those forwards and Winnipeg's goaltender and not think, well, that it's worth going futures heavy again for somebody who can add?
Hey, quickly, Murat, Dieter Stadinger, shout out to Dieter in the chat, was wondering, what do you think about Josh Manson as a trade option? We've heard his name bandied about in the last few days.
I keep seeing my familiarity with his game is really metrics based right now. And I keep seeing suggestions that he's been underwhelming in the last little while, that there was a high ceiling once projected for him for sure, and that he hasn't necessarily delivered. And then for it to really have a really intelligent opinion on him, that needs studying teammates, all of those sorts of things, because I don't want to overstate things, because I go back to Neil Pionk, and after the fact, looking at New York's defensive schemes, paying attention, doing the deep dive on the video, in the weeks following that trade, you realize New York's defense was awful and should have been awful. And some of these defensive impacts don't necessarily follow a guy from team to team. So to be quite honest, I need to know more about Josh Manson in a video perspective to really know.
Murat, big game tomorrow. Jets will try to make it 2 in a row in Vancouver and then get ready for the Calgary Flames. What do you have cooking at the Athletic coming up this week?
Well, one of my favorite things that happened on the internet, it was my own mistake, my clear mistake earlier this year when Cole Perfetti scored his first professional hockey league goal. And I tried to present him as the new king, Simba-style Lion King, and I used the wrong GIF, and I threw him off a Pride Rock. And that went around. And then I doubled down on it. Somebody's like, oh, that's a weird thing to say. I just thought that they were commenting on the Lion King. Like, why would I say that? And then I watched the whole thing. It was already around the internet by then. So I got texts from his dad, from family members, from like so many people that don't normally talk to me necessarily were messaging me to laugh at that. So we've got the Q&A. Finally talked to Cole Perfetti about that. That went up yesterday. And then from here on in, it will be focusing on the trade deadline. It will be deep diving the video on guys like Ekholm or Josh Manson or the other possibilities and dark horses that you might throw Winnipeg's way.
Well, and if you want to write on could Logan Stanley possibly be protected by the Winnipeg Jets in the expansion draft, you got another thing on the list coming up for the great work you do in the Athletic.
With attribution. Thanks for the idea.
You're the best. Murat, thanks so much. Enjoy the game tomorrow, and we'll look forward to doing this again soon. We really appreciate you joining us.
Right on. Thanks for having me, guys.
Good stuff. There he is, Murat Ates. If you're not already following him, I'm sure you are. It's at Murat WPG, and you can check out his work in The Athletic. Really looking forward to this next segment. Rick Ralph is teed up in the bullpen, ready to join us. We do want to thank Nick and Nikki DQ Group, Dairy Queen Northgate, Dairy Queen Polo Park, Dairy Queen Niverville, and Dairy Queen St. Anne's. Of course, it's springtime. That means getting outside, getting some ice cream, and maybe an ultimate grill burger, the most underrated burger in the field, I will tell you. So check it out. And to be honest, maybe you need to work off a couple of those blizzards. It's time to get outside. And Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway, 650 Rally and EK, has you ready for spring and summer. It is your outdoor headquarters. They are loaded with camping, wake surf, skateboarding. The bike shop is open right now. All the top brands of activewear in their newly expanded fitness department. So as we hopefully squeeze out of this period of our lives that have involved being inside so much, it's time to get outside, and Royal Sports is your number one stop to get ready for spring. Pop down and tell them the guys at Winnipeg Sports Talk sent you. All right, let's do this. We had a lot of fun with the big rig yesterday, and now it's time to welcome in our longtime partner on the afternoon ride on TSN 1290, the one and only king of the Maritimes himself, Rick Ralph. Rick, what is up? It's great to talk to you again, my friend.
Good to speak with you, Huss. I hope you've been well. It was nice to connect with Remis a little bit earlier, and I'll just assume he's unmuted me and everybody can hear me.
Yeah, he has. You know, listen, there have been some, overall, a few kinks as we've worked through this for the first couple weeks, but
Sure.
I have to say, Remis has he's done a great job. Maybe shocking to some, but he is getting us on the air. He is the chief technical officer of Winnipeg Sports Talk, and there's a lot on his plate.
Yeah, it was. I said, how you want to do this? He said, I'll send you a link. Just click on it. And next, everything works. So I thought, okay, a little bit of a different setup here, a little bit of duct tape, if you will, and not really set up like maybe Remis's basement is, but it's a work in progress here if we decide to go down that road.
Well, it's good. It's been a crazy month for all of us. We had a great chance to catch up with Jim, and we'll talk Jets in a minute. But how have you been? How have you been enjoying all this free time over the last month?
I think I've got the slowest build going on of anybody in building a basement bar. It's not quite done yet. It's one step at a time. Some days I feel like doing it. Today it was snowing outside. That's not really good for cutting wood outside. So I thought, well, take a day off from that. But that's kind of what I'm doing. And up first thing in the morning, checking the markets. The financial aspect is kind of a hobby of mine. So I don't have to keep track as much of the Jet stuff anymore. So a little more on the market side.
Well, it's funny. I mean, you obviously being a former journalism professor and coming through Toronto before coming here, have such great experience in the business. And it was you who told Remis and myself numerous times that, they say that you never really made it in this business until you've been fired. So I guess we've made it, Rick.
Well, I made it 11 years ago, and that was the first time it got blown out. My late mother now, of course, had a perpetual calendar, I think I've told you, and marked down June 24th, 2010 as being removed or excused, as my brother used to call it. And so that was the first time I'd been punted to the sidelines, and now here again a second time. But I was told as a student, And I used to pass it on to the students as well over a decade. And so funny, Marissa Roberto, who is the digital host there of TSN and TSN's Bar Down, she had tweeted out the day that a lot of the changes were being made to say that her instructor had told her and everybody that that time would come. And she saw a lot of people around her, and the one thing I did for the students was that it wasn't to scare them; it's just say, look, there are changes in this industry from time to time, and don't feel bad if it happens to you. You'll find your way back, and that's how I found my way to Winnipeg.
Well, and honestly, we've seen how thousands of industries and businesses have been affected through the pandemic, and we won't get into why certain decisions were made or whatnot. But I will say this. From a personal standpoint, being there, and you got there basically, Gary and I came on, we started on the summer. You were there a few months afterwards, and really starting at the beginning of 1290, being right there until the end. I think if it was going to end, I was more happy to kind of be blown out with everyone as part of a corporate nuclear bomb than sort of being there dying on the vine. And it's been amazing, and I know you've heard it really since February 8th or 9th or whatever the day was that everything happened. The connection that so many people in our market had with us and the people on this station, and how big sports talk was a part of so many people's lives. And I think that was what was sort of stunning about the decision, and just the fact that it pretty much disappeared overnight.
Yeah, and the first time it happened to me, it was a collection of individuals, not as large. But it was contained to one station and a change, and you'll see it throughout the industry that there's changes that continue to go. You see it in television. It's just the way things go. But to your point too, the connection that people have, especially with sports fans, right? Connected to the team, and it just so happened the Jets had come back, and the sports station then took off. It was Sports Talk 1290, and then of course the brand came aboard, and I think that's kind of what becomes almost a daily routine or a ritual. That you build with the listeners as you go ahead. And it started a little bit slow. It built. It got to the point where it really quite surprised me, the number of people that we had and the ratings that we did. But that was a testament, I think, to the excitement of here in the city and around the province of the sports fans.
No, absolutely. And we've seen this since kind of getting this going. The fact, and I don't know where the business overall is going. I just do know that, the ability to do things on your own is, light years ahead of where it would have been 10 years ago, for instance, with technology and, and obviously making those connections. But, it'll really be interesting to see, because, I think the one thing that we know is that a city like Winnipeg has the sports fans, is about as passionate a sports city. If this format is going to work anywhere, I would say it works here in Winnipeg. Whether that happens in the future, I'm not sure, or whether it's just a complete pivoting of the way content is delivered, sort of like what we're trying to do right now, filling the void, having fun, doing very similar stuff to what we used to do, just without the benefit of having it live on the AM dial.
Yeah, and it could be very different in, say, 2 or 3 years if the CRTC decides to relax some of their regulations. And then all of a sudden we could see quite a bit of change. But until then, it's still, I'm with you. Don't know where it's going. I heard Broadway Bill, who's a broadcaster in New York City and still working. And I get a kick out of watching him online every now and then. He's on the music side. But he thinks that, the radio side could take a little bit of a threat when artificial intelligence or self-driving vehicles come into the market. So hopefully that's a ways away yet. I'll still want to drive my own car, I think. There might be the odd time where I need something else to drive it. But, that was his opinion. And he thought if there's anything that will push radio aside, because there's been talk for years, about radio being pushed aside, it's proved that, as long as you're local, it seems to work. And people get a kick out of it still.
Oh, man. Rick Ralph's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. People are loving the return of Double R to the program. Taylor Ewell says Rick Ralph. Tom S. is all fired up for Rick. Tom Zappia, Maritime Math Rocks. Slick Rick. Great to see and hear Rick Ralph. And Tom says, ask if he knows how Straight Blade Keep Your Head Up Ralph is doing. One of the most legendary callers in the history of TSN 1290. We did catch up with him before the station shut down. And he was sort of hanging out, doing his thing through the pandemic. You think about certainly seniors, through this time. The radio was a way that so many of them did connect and stay connected to it. And we should mention, I mean, one of our favorites, Shelley the poet, passed away just, I think it may have been the final day that we were on the air.
Yeah.
Of course, we lost Cosmic
Weird
Bob
timing.
last year. But I mean, certainly dating back to when you started doing the post games, some pretty incredible characters that happened to be on the line, or might even showed up at the Boston Pizza back when the post game show was in the lounge and things got a little rowdy before we had to move it to the dining room.
Yeah, that's when things are a little more unpredictable, when we were broadcasting out of the lounge just as you entered Boston Pizza City Place. And the staff was great to us there the whole time. But it was funny. There's the unpredictable when you're around the bar side, and especially late at night when it became 11 or 12. Met a lot of great people, though. Sometimes on the air, sometimes it was off the air. I sat till close with a bunch of farmers from Brandon after one of the games. I'm trying to think of some of the other people that would come through. Not always. A lot would come up and just start talking to you, not realizing that you're on the air. You're listening to somebody else on the line. Somebody like Shelley the poet, as you mentioned, or Cosmic Bob, who came later in the programming. I don't remember him calling when we were in the lounge, but once we were in the restaurant, which is probably a good thing because I would have missed the comment where he painted his microwave and it blew up on him. It was always, really entertaining. Ralph in St. James, I haven't been in contact with him. I have his address. I have his phone number. I'll have to reach out to Ralph because we do have a connection on the military side out in Atlantic Canada. We never met, never knew one another down there. He's a little bit older than I am. But it was always fun. He was kind of like the ribbon cutting to the show is the way I looked at it. It was the ceremonial face-off.
Absolutely.
And then off we moved into the callers. You got Dan in St. Patal, who he always asks 4 questions. I always agree with the first 3 and disagree with the last one because I just knew it was going to happen that way. David in Calgary always seemed to be upset about things when he called. Dawn in the West End, I told her she should move to the East End. She didn't understand why. I left that with her. So there was a little bit of, as much as there was the game itself and discussing it, look, if it was an angry loss and people were emotional, there wasn't as much kidding around and we were straight-laced about it. But on the average night, if there wasn't a lot going on, and sometimes we could get a lot off topic. Bass playing Brian used to call from Windsor Park, and I'd ask where he'd be playing. And I never made it to any of his gigs, but I certainly have the time to do so and when things permit.
Bass playing Brian was a favorite of mine, and who could forget all the predictions on a nightly basis from Todd and St. B?
Yes. Yes, I wish he could work into the stock market. I would have been a little more curious on that one, but he was aggressive, or bullish, shall they say, when it came to the Jets and his predictions.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Rick Ralph's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. It's a little different now, not doing it every day. And you kind of mentioned, you're doing financial stuff in and around, but stepping away for a month from having to talk about it each and every day. What have you noticed or thought about the Jets and where they're at right now, coming off that win last night, but a couple tough nights against the Edmonton Oilers on the weekend?
Well, they're right in the thick, right? Like that North Division is still pretty tight. As much as you keep looking ahead, I've always been one to look behind to see who's coming behind. And Calgary and Vancouver, that was a good win. That was a great win last night, I thought, by the Jets. Surprised it's Hellebuck's first shutout of the season because, again, he's been called upon, again, as the MVP. And the thing I've noticed since, I stopped following them regularly every day and analyzing their stats, I dug out the numbers again today and had a look to see how things were going. And it's very familiar territory. Hellebuck, again, facing a lot of shots. Thatcher Demko's the guy with the number of pucks more so than Hellebuck, but he's number 2. Vasilevsky's played 30 less minutes, but has also faced 100 fewer shots. So there's a lot of pressure on Hellebuck, again, to perform. A .913 save percentage has been good. But again, the high danger opportunities, the scoring chances that the Winnipeg Jets are allowing, they're in the 30th, out of 31 teams, and it's not good. Place to be, but they survived on that way last year and they're doing it again this year. The question, I think, is on defense. We hear a lot of chatter from the insiders about the Jets needing some help on defense. I think everybody knows that, and it'll be up to Kevin Cheveldayoff to see what he can do to kind of bolster this defense because their power play has been really good. It's almost in the top 5 in the league. We haven't seen that in a long time. The penalty kill is almost around 80%. So there are some really encouraging spots with the club. But the defensive side of things is a little bit concerning, I think, at this point, and continues to be.
Yeah, and the power play is interesting because I think if there was one area that I think a lot of people were concerned might take a significant hit in the aftermath of the Laine trade was the power play. But, to their credit, they switched it around. It is sort of funny that Neil Pionk and Nikolai Ehlers and Pierre-Luc Dubois, 3 of the most important offensive players right now, are on that top unit. But it does give Paul Maurice 2 different looks. And I mean, they've been quite successful, and that, is imperative to make the most of those power play opportunities if you want to beat the likes of Edmonton and Toronto and be in contention for this Canadian division.
Well, we didn't see that, right, with Dubois when he first came in. Of course, he needed some time to find his legs. He'd spent 2 weeks hanging out in his house with his dogs. As one of the last guys I think we had a chance to speak to was Dubois. But it's taken some while to get acclimated, and then the coach has taken a little while to move some people around. And you mentioned the power play now and what it looks like, an awful lot different than what it was when Laine was here, or even Laine and Byfuglien. And yet it's more successful than when those two individuals were here. And that's not to say that those two weren't good players, but sometimes the mix becomes a little bit better. And so with some patience, I think we've seen, I've been looking at a lot of numbers for the last number of years. I don't remember the power play running at 25%, especially this late into a season. So that to me is a real bonus. And that speaks to the talent that they've got up front, because they're not getting the offense from the back end, right?
Yeah, no, that has been sort of one of the stories. I think 5 goals on the blue line, the league low so far this season, but winning games and sometimes leaning a bit more on that guy in the pipes, and he has been brilliant. Hey, shout out to Wayne Jones, who's tuning in from Norway. We're big in Norway, by the way, Rick. Winnipeg Sports Talk, huge.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Norway. Now, is he listening on, because I've received emails, or I used to anyway, from somebody living on the west coast of Norway. And it's always fun because it was John in Atlanta that used to call the post-game show, and there was a couple of guys in England that used to call over. But we have, you're right, there's been listeners either on the west coast, I'm pretty sure it's Norway. There was a little bit of Sweden too, but and one from Finland. But it's not uncommon to hear from the folks from Norway. It reminds me of the people I wish I'd have met. Well, I met them in a pub in Dublin, Ireland. They didn't speak any English. I wasn't Norwegian anyway, but we spoke for 2 hours.
Hey, what do you think Buff's doing right now?
That's a great question. With the ice melting now, I imagine this is a tough time of year for him because you can't go ice fishing, and it's not exactly springtime weather yet to get out there in the boat. So that's a good question. Every now and then I do wonder. I wonder what's up with Buff.
I wonder
and that would
all
be
the
kind
time.
of a great segment to be able to do if there was any kind of way of finding out what's going on. I think people would be surprised that maybe not much is going on.
One of the great things for hockey fans, and certainly fans here in Winnipeg, is if there was some light switch that went on in Buff's head, and all of a sudden he decided he wanted to be out there and get on social media and just document the life and times of Buff. He could make as much as he did playing hockey just off the amount of people that would want to watch Buff be Buff in regular life.
Yeah, it'd be fun just to see the odd video from him because he wasn't really into being interviewed, so I'd be shocked if that ever happens. But who knows? Over time, things change. But yeah, I agree with you. Just a first tweet, hey, what's up? Just kind of open that floodgate and see where it goes from there. But I don't know that I do know that he's got no interest in doing any of that kind of stuff because even when he was a player, he didn't enjoy doing it.
Well, and it doesn't seem like he has any interest in playing hockey. I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall after that, but I did see his wife put out an Instagram video last week maybe of a gift from Andrew Ladd to Buff, and it was a pair of custom Air Jordan or Nike shoes that were designed and painted with the Thrashers, the Blackhawks, the Cup, the Jets on it. And it came in this box, and it was unbelievable. I don't know who, it was obviously custom made, a big wooden box that kind of celebrated his career, and it was certainly put out as if it was a retirement gift. But as I said, Buff never did anything the ordinary way. He's probably retired, hasn't really told anyone he's retired, and just doing his thing. So if you see a guy in flashy shoes with the Thrashers, the Jets logos on them, and a Stanley Cup, the right one's silver, it's probably Big Buff.
Yeah, I'd be surprised to see him in such shoes, kind of inkling like it may be a court shoe. I can't imagine Buff being on the basketball court or a tennis court. He could prove me wrong, and I don't think he'd wear them fishing. So I'm not sure where you might see those. Used to spot them into some of the local watering holes in southwest part of the city. But now, of course, with some of those restrictions being a little bit lifted, but not being able to gather in groups, I haven't seen Buff, I don't think, since he retired.
No, you're going to love this. Wayne Jones in Norway has just informed us that Byfuglien is actually Norwegian. It means the city bird. There's a little bit of learning going on today.
That does come as a surprise, really. Having looked into history, I found England, Ireland, and Scotland. I can't imagine how all those families came together at that time to lead my family over here, but no connection to Norway. It's funny that Buff, really of no surprise, should be linked back to Norway.
Oh, no doubt. And, getting some great comments here in the chat. Thanks for everyone to be there and hit that like button while you're there. Nicole J said, I follow his wife on Instagram. They recently got a new ATV. So that's what Buff will be doing the next little while, riding around the ATV. I wonder if he's watched a single hockey game since he left.
I don't think so. And I think what was it, the podcast? It was a podcast that they were talking they were talking about him. They didn't have him.
Oh,
on.
I think it was on Chicklets. It was a couple of old guys.
Yeah. So I think it might have been Duncan Keith too that was talking about having him into Chicago's camp, and he didn't know any of the guys that had played before him, and hadn't watched hockey, which is it's different. I do know some former NHL players that just don't really pay attention to the game anymore, don't follow it all, and are off doing other stuff. But Buff was kind of like that while he was playing, even before he was drafted. So different bird, as my grandmother would say, but I always found him entertaining. But he's not locked into the game like many of us would think he would be.
In a perfect world, we get an off-season sitcom featuring Buff and Connor Hellebuck together and just their interesting conversations. That
Did we have Adam Party as a regular contributor to that?
Absolutely. He could be the narrator, the host of it all, if you will. Hey, Rick, we've talked a lot of hockey and just catching up. I am interested in what you thought about the news a couple weeks ago about the Canadian Football League apparently going into these talks with the XFL. My thought was, I don't know how far down the road they are, but just the fact that it's being considered, my reaction was, wow, things are really, really desperate for the Canadian Football League. What was your reaction when you heard it, and what do you think this means for this season and going forward?
Well, I think it never hurts to talk. It never hurts to have a conversation. Whether anything comes out of it or not, we'll see. But it certainly doesn't hurt to talk. You can maybe get ideas, share ideas, and look, let's face it, both these leagues, the Canadian Football League to me has had a little more success than the XFL has. This would be quite aggressive if we saw a merger between these two. I'd be interested to know what the Canadian, how much of it is adapted by the Canadian not laws, but the rules that the league has, because we've got such a history here, just passing 100 years. You'd hate to think that there'd be any compromise in that regard. But when you're starting to see, things move forward, things change, companies take over other companies, maybe it's inevitable that something does come out of that. Because as we'd heard from Randy Ambrosi, anytime we interviewed him, always looking to grow the game and looking for other ways to raise revenue. And within Canada, that's very limited.
Well,
and yet that's kind of the protection, what's made this game, I think, really attractive to the people in this country. But at the same time, they've been expanding, looking at, playing games or at least getting players out of Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, England, that sort of thing. So not surprising. Again, conversations are one thing. We'll see if anything comes out of it.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, and we've talked about this back on the ride. How things are changing, especially when it comes to sports betting, wagering, being legalized in a lot of places. And football is just the kingpin of all betting sports. If they were able to, and it would be a fundamental shift from when the Canadian Football League plays right now, but move the schedule up so that you're starting a lot earlier and ending around Labor Day, going into NFL season and being that football league that is on the other. I think that is sort of what they're, what the best case scenario for them going forward, if you actually did have some sort of a merger, if you will, and that, you've got a bigger league, but you've got good exposure, you've got interest from a wagering side of things, and you're doing it not head-to-head with the National Football League, but essentially leading into the NFL season with an opportunity for some players that do well in the league to maybe graduate to the top league in the world for the big money.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things there that would be attractive to both sides. At the same time, that the challenge to me within the Canadian Football League has been the individual cities and how different they are across the country, and how maybe the Winnipeg Blue Bombers don't want to play on a Friday or a Saturday, in the summer because folks want to go to their cabin. So there are those kind of challenges, I think, that'll exist. But, would that get rid of the Labor Day games? Would it change it where your playoffs are now Labor Day games? Would there be a new tradition there? Some people, they don't like change. There'd be a lot of opposition to that, I would think. But sometimes change is inevitable. Otherwise, if you don't change, things die. And I think that's kind of what, not to say the Canadian Football League's on the verge of dying, But this pandemic's been tough on everybody and certainly hasn't helped the Canadian Football League whatsoever, I wouldn't think, plus some of the companies that those owners own.
Well, no doubt. I mean, there's some people that will tell you that the Canadian Football League is in danger of dying. And, we had Dave Naylor on the day that he broke that news. And he said, as we sit here right now, he doesn't think that the ownership of the BC Lions, the Toronto Argonauts, or the Montreal Alouettes want to play this year. And if that is the case, your three biggest cities, the biggest markets in the league, if they can't stomach playing, then something has to change. And, we know that the stress that it's put on the organizations here in Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, two of the most successful teams, what's left of the other clubs right now. And that's why it seems to be such a precarious time for the Canadian Football League. Remember, they're the one league that had to cancel a season. A lot of the other ones that have good enough TV deals, they were able to do what they could do to get back on and play. And, listen, the Jets are going to take a big loss this year, but they thought it was important to do it. When you don't play and you don't have the ability to do that, that gets you in a more precarious situation, which I think is sort of where the CFL is right now and why we're hearing these reports of some things that would have been unthinkable a year or two ago.
Yeah, and you get into the big markets. You mentioned Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal. I mean, and it's funny that those are the places that, don't like the Canadian Football League on fire. Instead, it's Winnipeg, it's Saskatchewan, it's Edmonton, and to a degree, it's Calgary. I mean, you can even throw Hamilton into the mix. But the big centers have had a hard time with the Canadian Football League. And, the National Football League has had a deal with the Buffalo Bills a number of years ago with Rogers in Toronto to put a number of games there. I mean, Ted Rogers was looking and was being pushed to look, I think, at the time about bringing an NFL team into Canada. And it's just been a real struggle there. I don't know that there's been any of the owners that have owned anything in Toronto have made any money off of it. And that becomes a bit of a tough thing. And it's certainly a tough pill, I think, for folks here in Winnipeg to swallow when they see the success of what a team can have here. It's a much different market in Toronto and in Vancouver and in Montreal. And I could understand if those owners say, be better off not playing. I don't doubt them.
No doubt. Rick Ralph's with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Now, Rick, ever since you began here on 1290 doing the Jets post games and the roundtable, you put together the running log of the 10-game segments. Yeah. Now, over the course of the past year, the new 10-game segment list was the COVID number list. Yes. Have you continued updating your list over the past? That's right there. Okay, so I mean, what's going on with the variant, and are we gonna be out of this soon, or is this third wave potential going to be something we're still dealing with through the next few months?
Well, I was listening. This morning, some people in Calgary were talking about, today was supposed to be the day that things were supposed to change, and they were supposed to move to that next level. And Alberta said, no, that's not going to be the case because they're worried about the variant. We've had, our share of the variant here. It's not as bad as it seems in Ontario or Quebec or BC or Alberta, but doesn't mean that it won't get that way here. I think it hasn't changed very little anyway in the last 4 or 5 days. The cases were up a little bit today in the province, around 93 on 1,500 plus testing. So, the positivity rate continues to creep up a little bit. That, I think, is a little bit worrisome. Doesn't it feel like we're all in a race, yet none of us are moving? We're all in a race to try and get vaccinated, but nobody can move. You have to stay home. And it's the variant that's marching. And I've seen some epidemiologists say, well, if you're going to get into a race with the variant, with the vaccine, the variants are going to win. So hopefully that's not the case here. Everybody can kind of hang on maybe for another 60 to 90 days. And when everybody finally does have that shot in the arm, away we can go.
Well, we are getting some great news. I mean, I know my parents have a appointment to get vaccinated. Yesterday, it expanded to 65 plus. I mean, I think that when we get to the point where everyone over the age of 60, say, that has had the opportunity to do it, has been vaccinated, that's the next point where I think we can sort of hopefully move forward, because of course those are the people that have had the most severe complications of the virus. But I can't wait to be having conversations about sports, about the city, about stuff that don't involve COVID-19. But unfortunately, we're just not quite there yet.
No, and that's the one thing I think I've talked to one or two ex-NHL players just casually over the phone, and they don't like the game the way it is now. Nothing to do with the sport, the way it's being played, but the fact that fans aren't in the building. So the atmosphere is just completely different, and they personally can't get into watching games. And I thought that's interesting. I still enjoy watching games. I don't watch every one of them. But at the same time, if you had fans and that noise and that whole atmosphere, then I think you'd see a lot of other people just kind of tuning in. Because right now, I don't know what the ratings are for it, but I think people are getting tired of bubble hockey.
Yeah, well, listen, people want it. They're tired of not being able to go to games themselves, and they'd love the opportunity to pay $250 for a ticket. Even though sometimes that rubs people the wrong way when they're doing it on a regular basis. Dude, this has been so much fun to have you back on. Obviously, it was an absolute pleasure getting in the studio with you every day, and really through this year. Having what happened to me being in the hospital, coming out, I mean, that entire time getting back to work, just being able to come in every day, seeing you and seeing Remis, Ryan Brandt, literally the only people I did. It'll be times I'll always cherish them, and who knows what the future holds. But I'll tell you what, when you're finished building that bar, whenever it gets done, there's always a spot for you here on Winnipeg Sports Talk if you want it.
Yeah, I look forward to that. And to your point, too, I mean, even during a pandemic, we found out that we could draft groceries and just really make up radio, and it was still a lot of fun to do. So, yeah, hopefully we can do it once again soon, and who knows where the road leads next. But I've never been afraid of it because it can be quite surprising. I would have never thought I lived here in the prairies, but here I now have been here for 10 years. So maybe it's 11. I've lost count.
We'll have to tilt one soon, my friend. Thanks for doing this. It was a real fun time having you on the program.
Yeah, thanks to you. Thanks, Dreamer, too.
Right on. There he is, the one and only Rick Ralph. Follow him on Twitter if you aren't already. What are you doing? At Rick Ralph NS, our longtime partner on the afternoon ride, and really one of the names and voices absolutely synonymous with the radio station over the course of 10 years. Just an absolute beauty. That was a heck of a lot of fun. So we got a couple more things to do. I do want to get to the cool bet lines. I'll let you know that today we did the lock shop before Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. So we've got some picks on tonight's action in the NHL. We'll get those lines in a minute. But if you are into golf, especially golf betting, to me, this is the best tournament of the year. The Dell Match Play. There's, you can bet guys to win. You can bet guys to win their pods. There's 16 groups of 4 golfers. They'll all play through a round robin, and then individual matchups each day. So Dusty and I got into the WGC quite a bit earlier today. So make sure to go and check out at Lock Shop Bets. The full program will be there. Let's get Michael Remis back in here before we get to the numbers. Remo, a great interview with Murat Ates into just so much fun having Rick getting the three of us back together on the air. What an absolute beauty Rick is. That was so much fun having him on the show.
Yeah, a lot of talk about Byfuglien in the chat, so it's just fun speculating what you think Byfuglien is doing, what's he up to in his day-to-day life. I'm here for that. I did just check out his wife's Instagram for that picture, that box of goodies or the shoes that Andrew Ladd gave them. That's pretty cool. So you can kind of keep track. I know she's pretty active on Twitter. Emily Byfuglien Instagram as well. So people want Buff. Someone was commenting that they got an ATV as well, and you guys mentioned that. So
new ATV
and great. And an interesting conversation. I would have never guessed Logan Stanley being kept, but yeah, this is the last year of his entry-level deal, so they're gonna have to make a decision on him.
Where do you come out on that take? I saved the take. I was gonna text you last night, and I wanted to sit on it a little bit more. The more I think about it, I mean, listen, if you have an Ekholm or something that comes in, that may change the equation a little bit with protecting 3D men. But presently constructed as the Winnipeg Jets are, I think they're more likely to protect Logan Stanley and take their chances on Dylan DeMello or work out a deal. Because I think the cost to have a team not pick DeMello is less than a team not to pick Logan Stanley because of what he brings to the table and his age.
Yeah, and even if DeMello gets picked, is that the worst thing ever? I mean, he's got a bit of a long-term deal. You get yourself out of that, and maybe you can find someone who does a comparable thing for cheaper. So, I mean, we'll wait and see. But, yeah, maybe if they do get Ekholm, he would definitely be the guy, but we'll wait and see. It was interesting to hear Murat say how much he knows how much the organization is emotionally invested in Logan Stanley. And, he's been a project of theirs since he was drafted, so that's a guy you wouldn't want to lose in the expansion draft. And then I guess the other one, Kopp and Lowry, what happens with them as well. So, I'm I haven't really thought too much about the expansion draft. It seems so far away for a while, but it is approaching. We are approaching the deadline, so you are going to have to think about that when you make all these moves. And I know teams have been thinking about it for a while.
Well, we'll see how hot that take is, or whether it's freezing cold in a few months. But I just really, I think that, the way Stanley's played, what the organization has put into him and his development, and how he's rewarding them for it right now, is changing the equation when it comes to the Seattle expansion draft. All right, let's get to the lines, the daily lines for Coolbet today. Just 5 games in the National Hockey League: Philly at Jersey, Chicago, Florida, Nashville, Detroit, Dallas, Tampa, Arizona, and Colorado. Dallas plus 155 at Tampa, minus 185. I actually took the Stars in the dog pound today. It was kind of slim pickings for a good underdog. So we'll see whether we can take a shot at an upset of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then later on tonight, Dusty is on the Avalanche puck line. Remo, we were just going through some numbers before the program on the Avalanche, and you look back, they have been not just beating teams, but they have been massacring teams. Back 5-1 and then 6-0 against the Wild. Pretty damn good Wild team on the weekend. They've won 5 or 6 games by 3 or more goals. Dusty went on the puck line with them at plus 108 to win by 2. I kind of took a look at, what about win by 3? They literally have been doing that every night. You can get more than 2-1 on that if you want to really lay down a chunk on the Avalanche to win big.
Yeah, that seems crazy, but they have been just steamrolling everyone. They got Cale Makar back. Their top line's back together. They're a solid team. I'm curious to see what they do at the trade deadline. You look at that West Division, you have Vegas just ahead of them, actually 22-7-1. And Colorado 28-2, and it seems like we're on another collision course for those teams in the final of that division. Colorado ran into some goaltending injuries last year, Vegas, didn't go as far as they wanted to. But I'd say those teams are definitely top. Minnesota not far behind. Vegas did beat St. Louis; they're 4th in that division. So I do think it'll be those 4 teams there. But Colorado, they've been a powerhouse so far, and do they go and add someone? But as far as tonight goes, yeah, back-to-back against Arizona. Sure, why not take him on the puck line?
All right, there are lines for today's action in the National Hockey League. You can see it all at coolbet.com. And you can check out our Twitter feed for a tweet daily on Coolbet. And they've got some goodies in there for you as well if you want to play. I should mention, go to check out the Lock Shop podcast for full talk about picks on the pods. I do have 2 picks for you, though, that I will throw out for the match play. Couple long shots. Abraham Answer, 54-1. He's got a couple nickels for me. And Cam Smith, 39-1. Those are the 2 overall picks we've seen. There has been some chalky plays, world number 1s win in the past. There's also been some guys way off the board. But love both of these guys right now and the way their game sets up for the match play. So check out the Lock Shop if you want more on the pods and all the analysis of the tournament. But if you're just looking for a couple guys to maybe ride with, let's do it. I'm on Cam Smith, and I'm on Abe Answer for the WGC match play. It's going to be a bit of a slow sports night tonight, Reem. As we mentioned, only those 5 NHL games, but then right back at it tomorrow. We'll see whether the Jets can pick up where they left off after a real impressive win from the net all the way up to the top line.
Yeah, I agree. It was a big win. They needed it. I think they came into that game, they were like, we're not losing. We know we played well. We deserve better in those games. And shout out to the captain, Blake Wheeler, who started off the scoring. Their line was great. The third line was great. Lowry, Kopp getting in on the board. And they had kind of been quiet for a bit after a hot start. And I still think that second line, Ehlers, Dubois, Connor, has been excellent. Nikolai Ehlers didn't quite get on the board. But some of the cuts that he's made skating to evade contact have been incredible, the way he can move on the ice. There was one where he cut to the middle and then just fired a slapper from right in between the face-off circles in the offensive zone. So, he's getting better every week. And I know there was a poll, Huss, of top wingers in the league on ESPN we were discussing before the show. Ehlers didn't make the list, but Kyle Connor did. But I think those that are watching the Jets maybe see Ehlers as a more complete player than Kyle Connor, or that could be just me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, they're playing together right now on a pretty deadly line with Pierre-Luc Dubois. They did have a moment. I will say this, as great as that game was last night, that line did have one of the worst shifts of the year in last night's game when they were up 1-0 in the second period. There's about 3 different giveaways. Pionk got in on it as well. That being said, they got the puck out, they steadied it, and the rest of the team got the job done, led by Adam Lowry with those 2 third-period goals. Thanks again to everyone that joined us today in the chat. Man, we've got just so many people firing out. Got to give a shout-out to our pal Derek in Vancouver Island. Good to see Hustler and Remis back at it. Derek, was a loyal caller back in the 1290 days. And everyone else, Mitch, Winnipeg Hockey Talk, you damn right, mixed curling's on TV tonight. And actually, just quickly on that, if you go to CoolBet, if you're like me, that is all in on the mixed curling, we now have odds for the mixed doubles championship. Jen Jones, her husband Brett Lang are the favorites, and then Carrie Anerson and Brad Gushu, second favorite at 3-1. I'll be checking those out, looking ahead for the matchups. That mixed curling is a lot of fun, and it's on a lot right now on TSN. Remo, tomorrow should be another great show. Kevin O is going to join us as we continue welcoming back the boys from 1290, and we'll get ready for another big hockey game. Sure would be nice for the Jets after losing 2 in a row in Edmonton to get a couple going into a big series against the Calgary Flames team that I'm sure will be in an ornery mood after losing again to the Ottawa Senators last night.
Yeah, I don't trust Calgary. I mean, you'd think that they would be in a bad mood, but you think they would have been in a better mood after they fired the coach. But I think it worked for like a game or two, and now they're back at their inconsistent ways. As for the Jets, I wonder if we end up seeing Laurent Brossoit, where he comes in. I guess there's a back-to-back Friday, Saturday, so it'd probably be one of those. But he has played so well in Vancouver this year. I know he's from there. I don't think the schedule sets up that way, but maybe split these two. I think he's earned more games, He's played so well. So I don't think that's going to happen, but we will see. We'll see if there's any other line changes. I'm not anticipating any, but they did switch up the defense pairs. That was the only one, but seems to keep it going. Bring that same mentality, and they should be able to take another one from Vancouver.
Thanks to Jeff Cabillas, the GOAT, Gregory Liverpool himself, Jesse the pizza delivery guy, Jay Peltz, Jeff Dirksen, Albin Bally, and of course Wayne Jones in Norway, everyone that popped in, the Godfather, Mitch from Winnipeg Hockey Talk. Man, it's amazing, Remo. And this show in particular, I think having the likes of Murat and Rick join us had people fired up. But man, there's been packed in the chat room all along. It continues to grow, and I'm looking forward to the big show tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, always fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what Kevin O's been up to. I know he's doing stuff with the Winnipeg Ice. What a unique season it is in the WHL. And I did like his new profile picture, rocking that Ice jersey. I think they have some pretty sweet jerseys. I've been looking to add one of those to the collection back here.
Yeah, so we'll be talking some Jets and some Ice tomorrow with Kevin O and catching up with him. Brandon Rowicki is going to join us live on Thursday, and we finish it off with Westy, Troy Westwood of the Big Show on Friday. Should be a heck of a lot of fun. All right, we got to get these pods up for people on their way home. Remo, great show today as always. Thanks for all of your work, and we can't thank Murat Ates and the one and only Rick Ralph for joining us today. As I said, hit that like button. If you're listening on the podcast, do us a favor and rate and review. We want to thank Not Auto Corp, Boston Pizza, Winnipeg, Royal Sports, and the Nick and Nikki DQ Group, and of course, CoolBet and our newest sponsor, Breezy Bend Country Club. Can't wait to start getting going with Breezy in the next few days. That's going to do it for us, gang. Have a great Tuesday night. We'll be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock, live on YouTube on Wednesday, getting ready for the Jets and Vancouver Canucks. Have a great night. You've been listening to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.